If we're being honest, the Eagles didn't solve the cornerback two spot last year despite Adoree Jackson's best effort. With their current Super Bowl window, there's no room for another swing and miss. The draft might have options, but if they want immediate stability, free agency is where this needs to get fixed. Here are the corners that make the most sense next to Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell next season, and one guy in particular will really excite you.
Jamel Dean would be one of the top ones, but as we were speaking about offline here, pre-show, at 29 years old, I don't know that that's exactly the kind of guy they want to make a 3-4 year investment in. So I would probably pivot to Tariq Woolen out of Seattle. Despite his ill-advised, unsportsmanlike penalty in the NFC Championship game that almost cost them their Super Bowl title. Quite frankly, I mean, they almost lost that game because of that. I'd say he could be a likely target for the Eagles. He's shown game-altering traits all the way back from college. His size is, uncanny for the position. I believe you mentioned he was 6'4" when we were offline there. He's got speed. He's got a knack for producing turnovers. I believe he had 6 picks his rookie season.
Mhm.
He only had 7 starts last year, so that could maybe drive the price down in a range that the Eagles would be comfortable with. Um, I think he's an intriguing option opposite Quinyon Mitchell as the Eagles CB2, and a Fangio defense could unlock the high kind of level production that his tape has always hinted at and actually showed his rookie season. So I think he would be way at the top for me.
Yeah, Tariq Woolen, I feel like he's a very interesting idea to line up alongside Quinyon Mitchell. Like we mentioned, he's 6'4", long, explosive press corner, elite length and speed, like you mentioned. But he had a moment like after his like what first I want to say 2 seasons maybe. He kind of fell to the wayside and disappeared a bit until this season with Seattle.
I mean, in 23 and 24, he made almost 30 starts those 2 years. So it wasn't from a lack of opportunity. But you're right, his production. I mean, he was a Pro Bowler, third Rookie of the Year. Had All Pro votes. I mean, he may have even been the second team All Pro that rookie season. I mean, he was really good. I
He
don't
was
really know
balling out.
what, huh?
He was balling out.
Yeah, he was amazing, and I really don't know what happened because he picked up right like he left off in college, just dominating. But this year, towards the end of the season, I think you saw a little bit of what he was before, but I do think he wants a fresh start. I mean, we were kind of joking about his ex post today of him like Will Smith during the series finale where he's just standing in the empty house there in the room. So I think a change of scenery is probably, good for him. And with the price driven down the way it has been, because a lot of people will question, why he wasn't good. Um, I think he falls into the range that, the Eagles could feel comfortable getting because they're playing with a very limited, amount of money this offseason. So they're going to have to do some kind of bargain bin shopping. And I wouldn't consider him, bottom of the barrel bargain bin shopping, but he will come at a cheaper price than he probably should.
I mean, 26 years old, like we said before. He has a big boomer bust potential, but like you mentioned, he's a playmaker, and I feel like a guy like that, alongside a player like Quinyon Mitchell, is gonna just excel because you're gonna have quarterbacks targeting you more than they target Q, more than they target Cooper because they want to stay away from those guys, and he's a bit of risk taker. It kind of reminds me of Asante Samuel during his time in Philadelphia, which could be very beneficial. And like you mentioned, he would probably come cheap, and it's probably more ideal for this scheme and for this team. But let's kind of segue to 1A, Jamel Dean. I mean, do you feel like there's a chance that Philadelphia could look his way just because he is older and might become a little bit cheaper? Or is it one of those things where, you can't really see him leaving Tampa, or he'll probably go to somebody that's going to pay him big money?
Yeah, I mean, I do think he won't get the money he's seeking for. And normally when that happens, you kind of just go back to where you came, which would kind of mean he'd probably stay with Tampa. It's what he's familiar with. It's where he's succeeded in. I mean, he would be the boundary corner that the Eagles could set and forget for a couple seasons. It would be not the rotational door that they've had there, the past couple years. He consistently shuts down receivers. He creates turnovers. He posted really strong passer rating levels, the last couple seasons. He's exactly the kind of reliability that Philadelphia covets on the outside, but it probably does come a little bit at a price that they might not be willing to pay, or might, quite honestly, just might not be able to pay.
So his market value right now is 12 million annually. There's a ton of guys on this list that could make sense for Philadelphia. There's one player that I'm very curious to kind of pick your brain about just because he's had a stint in Philadelphia. I feel like he wasn't utilized to his potential, but he was utilized pretty well in Seattle. Josh Jobe.
I mean, I've always been a big fan of him. I don't know if they bring him back. I don't really know what the circumstances were, other than a lack of opportunity in Philadelphia. But it never, his practices, he would look good, and it just never translated to on-field production here. And I don't really know why. But you're right. He did come. He came out and was very, very serviceable this season. I don't know that he's the kind of uh, boundary corner that they're looking for. He had a lot of battles with Eli Ricks. If remember those years where we
Hmm.
thought one of them might hit.
Yeah.
Jobe came out of Alabama. He fought through some injuries, and it's probably why he fell the way he did in the draft as well. But without having any insight into why it never really worked here, I didn't have the locker room availability and the practices as I do now. So I don't really have any insight into why that didn't work out, but it never translated. And I would be a little surprised to see him go back to that well.
I was very curious to know why him and Ricks never really got the playing time that they got. I know people in the front office as well as fans were in the later stages of their time in Philadelphia were heavily invested into seeing what Ringo had, and everybody's been hyped up about Keely Ringo, who's yet to come into his own in Philadelphia. Didn't look the part last season. But another player that you actually wrote an article about these cornerbacks, and there's a player in there that kind of fell to the wayside, just like Jobe and Ricks have. That's Rasul Douglas, who was with Philadelphia at one point. A lot of people felt like he had great potential, but just didn't fit the Jim Shorts scheme. And he's actually excelled not to a huge level, but to a playable level in with other teams. Do you feel like we can possibly see a reunion with Rasul Douglas in Philadelphia, and would that make the most sense in Fangio's scheme? He's
I mean,
31 years old now.
I do think that they're, unlike Job and Rex, who we were talking about, Douglas began his career in Philadelphia the same way, but he was part of that Super Bowl run in 2017, and his personality really fit in, and so did his work ethic. And again, I can't speak to the other two because I wasn't around them much, but I remember Rasul going all the way back to West Virginia. I was really excited when
Mhm.
they drafted him in 2017. I was actually at the draft. I spoke with them. I was ecstatic. Like, I thought he was going to be, really good player. Then he told me that he loved eating at McDonald's all the time, and I started questioning his fitness level. But 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 anyway, even at 31 years old, he turns 32 this year. He performed well recently, especially in coverage metrics. He ranked really strong in pass defense, and like I mentioned, the coverage grades. He was prominent in defensive scheme that Philadelphia kind of runs. I still think he has, productive football left in him. I think he could be a reliable cornerback two at best, and a quality rotational corner at worst. And he also, I mentioned his work ethic. I think, he could help develop young talent if they do go the route of not taking a corner in the first round, but somewhere in the third or fourth. I think, he's a strong cornerback that can teach that kind of work ethic and the Philly way of doing things. I don't think it's changed much since he left. Um, and there was kind of a transition. When we got Quinion, we were kind of transitioning out of Slay, and then Slay, kind of got his role taken by Q, and then Isaiah Rogers comes in to try to fill that second role, and then Adoree Jackson. So I think if you see Rasul here, it's kind of the same thing we've seen the past 2 years, where he kind of fits that role. But I do believe, he could perform just as well as Adoree did, and I think he's a very logical fallback, because I don't think it's going to take a lot of money to bring him in. The budget and contract outlook seems pretty favorable on a short-term deal with, a low risk. So yeah, I like him.
There's another player that you mentioned. in your article that's to me it's low risk, high reward, and it's one of those moves that it's just inevitable at this point. Asante Samuel Jr. did sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. Right after he had his after he recovered from his injury, didn't have the greatest of seasons in Pittsburgh. Is a free agent again. Could you see Asante Samuel Jr. at 27 years old being a part of this Fangio defense for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, because I think that his market is going to be suppressed due to that neck injury. And those are the kind of bargains that, again, if they're going this CB2 rotational door, this is the kind of bargain 1 year low risk opportunity you look for, because they could theoretically structure it a 1 year prove it contract. And if they like what they see, you know, extend them in season. The last name Samuel resonates in Philadelphia. I mean, you mentioned earlier how successful his father was as a standout Eagles cornerback in the late 2000s. There's some legacy there with that. Before the injuries slowed Junior down, he was a productive NFL cornerback. He totaled multiple interceptions and pass breakups over his early season there with the Chargers. He showed a lot of ball skills and playmaking ability. Um, when you have emerging corners like Quinion and Cooper, already in your secondary, I think, Asante comes in not having to be the guy. He just kind of does his role, plays, maybe behind a rookie, maybe he plays above the rookie if they get one. And, I think his strengths are instincts, quick recognition, and ball skills. And I think that does align with the way Fangio's defensive scheme values playmaking cornerbacks in their zone and, matchup concepts. So, yeah, I do think he's a fit. And I think if the price is as low as everybody believes it to be, he's one of the better, 1 year low risk opportunities you could get.
I think bringing Samuel over for all the points that you just made makes all the sense in the world. Just because you're putting him in a situation that's a win-win. You're putting him, not to be the guy, not even to be the second guy because you have Cooper here,
Right.
but to just to play your role, play your position, and a guy that's trying to, I guess, revamp his career after that neck injury. It's a win-win situation for him, especially coming to a team that's contending year in and year out with the Philadelphia Eagles and Woolen as well. Woolen is just he intrigues me a lot because he's long, he's athletic, and he seems like that. Like I said in the beginning, he seems like the guy that could strongly benefit from having a lockdown corner opposite of him in Quinion Mitchell. And we know that cornerback has plagued the Eagles for years until they drafted Mitchell and Gene in the same draft.
One more corner before we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
He's kind of, I think he's almost the same size as Tariq Woolen. I think he's 6'4". It's Nashawn Wright out of Chicago. His breakout season kind of caught everyone's attention. I still think he's a little more of a developmental project in my opinion, but he has an intriguing high upside. He had a massive breakout after basically being practice squad and special teams. He became the full-time starter this year and led the NFL in takeaways. I think he had 8 total
Uh,
takeaways, including 5
oh,
interceptions,
yes.
which is a rare, valuable trait. He even earned, Pro Bowl recognition. The Eagles, again, they value those impact defensive backs who can generate those turnovers in big moments, like one of them who might be leaving and Reed Blankenship. You could always count on him in those big moments, just to come up with that turnover. So the kind of production that you're possibly getting on a cheap 1 year deal could be highly appealing to the Eagles. And again, I mentioned that length. I think he's 6'4", which is again just a uncommon physical profile for an NFL corner. And especially in the red zone, they just become so valuable because they
Hmm.
dominate in the jump ball situations and matchups against the big receivers there.
I completely agree, and I'm curious to see how he would develop in Philadelphia. I kind of wish Christian Parker was still here, just because having him as a secondary coach with a guy like Wright, could make him a more well polished NFL cornerback. But I'm very curious to see the route that the Eagles do take with this position group. If you had to put all your money on the table right now and bet on the Eagles making one move within this position group in the free agent class, who's your money on that they're signing?
Tariq Woolen.
I knew it.
I'd like to say Asante Samuel Jr. because I think he could possibly give the most bang for the buck, but that neck injury and the problems that he's tried to fight through are a little concerning. I think if you're in a Super Bowl window like you mentioned at the top of this show, Woolen solidifies that window isn't shutting due to a leaky defensive backfield.
26 years old, 6'4" cornerback. We know he gets turnovers. It'll be a hell of a move for Philadelphia. I definitely want to thank you all for joining us today on this episode of Flippin' Earth. We're going to break down more position groups as we go by. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, and comment your thoughts on the Eagles free agent class. Until next week, I'm Brian Cameron alongside David Neese, and we're flipping the birds. Flip.